Thank you very much for coming along to my talk. It will be even more whistle stop than usual because we're starting slightly late. So let's dive in. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview of NetBeans, which is an open source IDE from the Apache Foundation. I hope that I will interest you in trying out NetBeans. If not, I hope I will interest you in thinking about how you use your IDE and how you might use it differently. So let's introduce myself first. I'm always curious. I do like cats as well, so you might find quite a few cat pictures in this talk. I have a day job as a Java developer. I write code for our PDF libraries. I'm based in the UK. I run a software company called IDL Solutions, which was founded in 1999. We've just celebrated our 24th year. I've written code in lots and lots of tools. I've used JBuilder, Visual Studio, JEdit, Forte, Eclipse, and I now use IntelliJ and NetBeans for my tools. You'll see both of those on my icon bar when we dive into NetBeans. And I'm a big NetBeans fan. I'm a regular speaker at events. I've been coming to Devfest since 2013. It's so nice to be back in person. Thank you for inviting me back. As I said, I'm a big NetBeans fan. I use NetBeans for testing. I was involved in the conversion, and we'll talk about that later. So my day job is I work in PDF. I handle HTML5, SVG, and Java. We have the IDR Solutions stand, so I'm not there to talk. I also have a degree in medieval history. So Devfest Istanbul is really my perfect conference. I get to mix my interest in history and my interest in software. So again, thank you for inviting me. I have a stand outside, so if you're interested in any of the above, please come and talk to me. I'm equally happily discussing how to convert PDFs in PHP or early Byzantine history of Hagia Sophia. So let's introduce you to NetBeans. Before I dive in, I'd like you to think of NetBeans not just as an IDE, but it's also a platform or a framework. When the developers created it, they created it in a very nice, abstract fashion. So you can actually use the platform to write your own code. There are a couple of commercial companies that actually use NetBeans as the base for their in-house tools because it's fully robust, it's well designed, it has an awful lot of functionality. You can do things that you can't do in any other Java GUI toolkit. For example, you can have persistent components which can recreate themselves. So I'm going to introduce you to the IDE, but I'd like you to think of NetBeans as both a framework and a platform as well. So let's tell you where NetBeans came from. So NetBeans originally was the ultimate student project went wrong. They got a bit carried away. They wanted to write a tool for handling the new Java language in the late 1990s, and they wrote NetBeans. And it was acquired by Sun, who were then acquired by Oracle. So for a lot of time, NetBeans was part of Oracle. And it didn't really sit well in Oracle. It's very much a techie, GUI, developer-based community product, and that's just not Oracle. So Oracle gave it to Apache. So if you haven't come across the Apache Foundation, I'm pretty sure you're using some software that comes from the Apache Foundation. If you go to their website, the projects that they support includes FTP, Maven, Git, just about anything that's working. So you are probably using an Apache product on your system, or definitely multiple ones. So under the Apache Foundation, it's now a fully open source library. You can download the source code. You can actually run NetBeans inside NetBeans as a NetBeans project. There are 4 releases a year. NetBeans 16 came out last week. So if you haven't seen that, you'll get a sneak preview of my slides. It's free to download on the website. It has a very active GitHub community. There are currently 184 active contributors last time I looked to it. So it's a really exciting project with quarterly releases, a lot going on. I've talked a lot about Java, but it's not just for Java. NetBeans is multiple languages. One of the really nice things in NetBeans is if you have a PHP, C or Java backend putting onto HTML, you can develop the whole thing on NetBeans. So let's jump in and have a look. So I'm going to talk about living inside NetBeans now. The rest of my slides are going to be essentially for my notice to tell me what to do. So first of all, we're going to talk about living inside NetBeans. So this is NetBeans. This is what it looks like when you fire it up. It's a standard layout as you'd expect with or familiar with from most IDEs. So let's take you for a little tour around. Top of the page, we have the start page. We'll also have any code appearing in the web editor window up here. Down here we have output. We also have options for test results, bookmarks. There are an awful lot of windows I can have displaying. I've got it down to my bare minimum. You could also have a terminal if you want to write bash. And you can also have reptil window. So if you're ever familiar with Java, you can write Java. And again, one of the nice things in NetBeans is anything in NetBeans, like keyboard shortcuts, works automatically all over the place. So let's do hello world. And if I press return, you'll see the output there. So there's a reptil built in. So that's the NetBeans side display here. These windows are all fully dockable, so I can move them around if I don't like where they are. I move them. I can also undock them, so I can literally take them out of the system, generally sort of break the thing. If you find you've broken it, you can always go and reset the windows there. So let's have a look at some of the other windows. Over here is probably the window you'll use most. This is where we can see the projects. Again, there are different icons for them. Let's open a project. Let's go back to that window we showed you originally. So again, NetBeans is highly modular. So by default, it comes with options for Java. Again, Maven, Gradle, Ant. You can also do HTML, JavaScript. You can do C++, you can do PHP. So there are multiple options built in. And because it's modular, you can add new functionality. And you can write your own functionality if you want. We'll be talking about that later. So let's have a look at a little Java example. So I open that. Again, it will give me lots of useful defaults, and there's lots of nice built-in functionality. So here you can see I've got that set up. I've got source packages. I can go down to them. So if I open a Java window here, you'll see Java appearing. Again, most of these windows have an awful lot of features, functionality to allow you to manipulate the code. You can see the source code. If it's a graphics page, you can see the design. So this is a Matisse login. So you can actually drag and drop components and create swing components. And you can see the local history on the file. So this is new, so nothing's changed. As soon as I start editing it, you will see, it's going to edit it. So I've made a change there. Now if I go to history, you can see it's got a change. And it will tell me exactly what it's changed. And I can go through there. So that's the local history is built in. So let's close that. And let's check what else we've done. Oh yes, you can also have full screen. So NetBeans take over the screen, and yeah, let's introduce some of these. So if I don't want a project-orientated view, again, these icons are based on projects. So that's a Java project. If I had a PHP project, it would be a different icon. These are Maven projects, so I have both Maven code and I have refactor projects. You'll see there's a slightly different icon. So that's my Maven refactor project. Everything's separated out. I can see the Maven modules there. I can open them. If I go to an actual code module, you can see I've got the source code, got the test packages. Go down to the bottom. Got the key project files. Because it's a Maven file, it's running on a POM value. And again, this opens up here nicely. So that's where the projects are. I can also have a flat file view if I prefer not to have such an object-orientated view. That little icon's telling me I've made a change to that project. So there's loads of little visual clues in the code. And I can also have services. So I can actually plug into Docker. I can plug into Hudson. Any of these services. I can create additional services as well if I want. I generally spend most of my time in the projects window. The one down here is, again, my navigator, and it's context sensitive. Because I'm displaying a POM file, it's obviously related to that. If I go and look at a Java file, let's go to anagram. You'll see it's now changed into different navigator, which is really nice. Lastly, across the top, I've got some, obviously, functionality. There's a lot of keyboard shortcuts as well, we'll cover in a minute. Got lots of functions. Nice thing here is I can configure this. So if I want to add an additional set of buttons, I can bring them up. I can take them off. And I can also drag and drop buttons. So I can configure the whole thing. This is also context sensitive. So if I jump down here into one of my classes, so this is inversion control. If I jump into one of my classes, okay, so you'll see now these icons have highlighted. So this is my Git. So again, I can show annotations on this file. I can do reverts, pull, push. And this is all context sensitive. So you can configure NetBeans really exactly how you want to use it. Whether you want to run the keyboard, whether you want to click from icons, it's all there. All the keyboard shortcuts are shown on the screen and we can change them, which is what we'll look at later. Okay, so I think I've covered everything on that slide. So let's briefly, so as I said, you can live inside NetBeans, you can configure it to your heart's consent. When you find you've broken it, messed it around, but reset off the menu. Okay, I've mentioned earlier, NetBeans is context sensitive. So everything in NetBeans has a context. So all of these highlighting, all of this information, all of the buttons that are highlighted are being picked up off whatever's relevant. If I run a command here, you'll see this is Java, so I've got a Java menu. If I chose the POM file, I get a completely different menu. If I choose to do a search and replace on this level, I could get the file, or I could get a much higher level. So everything in NetBeans is context sensitive. So if you've selected something and you can't find the option you want, it's probably because you've just gone into the wrong menu. Okay, so let's look at how we can configure it. So we've already talked about the fact you can drag everything around. We also have, a large number of configuration options. So if you're using NetBeans in the Mac, it's on preferences. If you use it on the Mac, it's on Windows, it's on options. Okay, so I can go in here. This is the standard flat look and feel. If I want to change the look and feel, I can go to multiple other look and feels. Because it's plugin based, you can also download additional plugins. So if you like the intelligent dark feel but want to try it in NetBeans, you can download that as a plugin and use it. So I can change it to light, dark, whatever I want. I can totally configure the editor, and that includes things like formatting. We're pretty much a 4 tabs type of an organization. You can set the tabbing to anything you want. You can set the indents. You can export the values so you can share them with your team, or you can import values. So you can have lots of proper class wars on Java or any other language on where those braces come and whether they're on the same line or different lines. You've also got code templates, which we'll be showing you later. So these are keyboard shortcuts. You can add your own. Formatting, you can control just about every feature. You can also change all the colors. You can have some color schemes. Keyboard shortcuts. Again, if you're used to a different team, if you're familiar with the IntelliJ keyboard shortcuts or Emacs, you can switch to those. Keyboard shortcuts you can totally define to how you want. So if you want to see where the format is, you can see format set with Control Shift S there. And if I want to know whether Control Space is assigned to anything, I can see that. So everything in NetBeans is totally configurable and totally shareable. You can also, if you prefer, change the layout on this. So I'm a reduced tree type of a guy. If you want those classes to be lists or trees, you can change it there. Okay, project groups is one of my favorite features in NetBeans. So essentially that allows you to have live project views that you can change around. So if I go here, you can see I've got that list at the moment. So let's switch to a different project group. So let's go to, which one was I working on last night? Okay, so that's a different group. So I can have essentially different live views of projects set up. And what's also quite nice is these can either be static or they can essentially auto-save. So you can have lots of multiple different views of lots of multiple projects. Let's go back to, I believe that's the one we're using. Nope. Okay, let's go back to that one. I can open up stuff if I need. Okay, so that's a nice simple view. So project groups, there's also a document groups function, so you can have the same functionality there. So let's carry on. Okay, so what we're going to do now is talk about writing code. That's what we need to do first and foremost in life. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to create a new class. So let's go to here, and again, it's context sensitive. So it will create things, so I can create a Java class at that point. So I'm going to call it my new class. Okay, it's in the server, again, packages. Again, NetBeans will drop me lots of subtle hints with whatever language I'm working in about how to do things properly, and I'm going to ignore it because I know better. Okay, so we've got a nice empty class here. Again, NetBeans is trying to make you avoid writing code you don't need to write. So we've got the ability to change the headings there. Let's go down here. So if you're ever in doubt on NetBeans, the 2 buttons you press are Control and Space, which gives you auto completion, which is also context sensitive. Because this is Java and I'm in a class, it's given me the options that make sense here. So I can, for example, create a public static main class. What I can also do is I've got all these keyboard shortcuts down here, and I can define my own things. So PSVM tab. Okay, so I've got public static class there. So I'm now going to create a class. So I want, sorry. Okay, and if I start typing, okay, if I press Alt space, it knows which class it is, and it will auto-complete for me. So let's also tell it that we want to have a value there. Okay, so these little buttons are popping up here telling me useful things. These are the hints. and they can all be switched on or switched off, and they can be made to hints or they can be made to errors. So let's go down there, and it's telling me that I have not got. What's it telling me? Okay, so it's telling me that I need. Okay. Okay, so it's spotted that there's no constructor that exists in this class. So it's giving me the option to change it back, or it's giving me the option to create a new one. So let's let it do the work for us. So it's now created a new constructor for us. Okay, and it's also spotted at the moment I haven't used this string. One of the features I really like on NetBeans is it generates code very defensively. So you can see it's added an exception here. So if I've accidentally overridden a Java method from somewhere else, I'll pick it up immediately. I won't get empty classes breaking my code. So let's do something useful. So if control space string equals 2, okay, and then if space. So again, I'm using the keyboard shortcuts to do things faster. So string is 2. Okay, and again, I can choose that, and let's Control-Shift-F to auto-format it. Okay, so what NetBeans has now spotted is that I've made a bit of a silly mistake in my code. So if you do that in Java, that's not a good way to write Java. So let's change that to dot equals. Okay, so now that's a much better way. So NetBeans has picked up my mistake. It's also corrected it in a sensible way. I can also add bookmarks to it. So I want to bookmark the code. I can add a bookmark to it. So let's add a bookmark there. And if I go to the bookmarks, they can be across multiple projects and they can be multiple places. So let's toggle bookmark. Okay. And what I can also do is go to the bookmark. I can rename it. So I can give it sensible names so it's easy to understand what they do. Okay, so okay, so I've covered sample projects earlier. I've talked about the templates with the PSVM, allowing to put code, getters and setters. I haven't done that. That's cool. So let's do that to finish. So when I started writing code, I had to write lots of boilerplate code. So I would create something like an integer, and then I'd have to write the getters and the setters. So what NetBeans will also do is if I press Control Space, it will spot that actually there is a new value called get, which could have a getter or a setter, and it will auto-generate the code for me. So it is also trying to spot useful methods. So that saves a lot of writing of code. So that's a really nice feature, auto-generation. Okay, so we've written some code, and the next thing we need to do is debug it to find out what's going on. So again, NetBeans has a nice debugger. Let's use our class here. Let's go through it. So if I run that code, again, I can run it from the project, or I can run it from... Okay. 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 I'm going to go back to my... I'm going to run it from here just because I want to keep it simpler. Okay. Okay. So I can run that file. Okay, sorry. So I haven't got it set up correctly. Okay. Nice thing on Means also is it will actually print the output here. So whatever language it's running, you can see what options it's using. So there it's actually output that code, and that's what it does. So what I can actually do is I can put a debug flag in it. So let's go to that code, and let's go to the main method. Okay, so there's the main method. So what I can do is I can put a debug flag in there. Again, I can either have just a standard breakpoint, which means stop there, or I can essentially have the ability to have properties. So I can calculate values. This is really useful in any debugging in any IDE, as you can set it to any values and it will run it. So again, if I now run it in debug mode, it will stop there. So let's run it as a debug. Okay, and what's really nice as well is I can see any values that have been created. And I can see the stack trace up here. So I can essentially go back to the code, I can see what's happening, I can step through it. You'll now notice that these are now live, so I can step over, I can step into. I'm going to skip the rest of that because I'm conscious of time. So let's quit that. So we can debug the code, and obviously, once we got it working, we want to be able to test the code. So one of the nice features you get in the test code is that you can actually add your own. Let's close that. Okay. Test. So if I go here and go to, I don't know, project groups, tools. Okay. So I have the ability to create some tests here. So this will allow me to choose which framework I want to use. Again, there are plugins that will give me new frameworks, and it will create some test methods. You can run all the tests from inside NetBeans as well, and it will create them. Something I should have shown you as well is if you go here, you can always find the code very nicely by clicking there. Okay, so that's now written some test packages. By default, it will have created some classes which essentially stubs. So the tests will all fail until I fix them. So if I go in here, I've got the standard methods to pick up and pull down, and it will create test classes for any public classes I've got. Okay, so let's go back to Maven. Okay, so Maven support is one of my favorite features in NetBeans. So I'm going to go back to my server module, and you'll see we have a POM file. One of the great things about NetBeans is it's almost as if the POM file is Maven's default file format. It just works. So I've got the POM file here. Again, I've got all the functionality you'd expect. I've got the ability to see the history. I can see the graph here, so I can see the dependencies. So that gives you the dependencies within Maven. I can also see the effective Maven, which is really nice because this class inherits certain values from certain other ones. So I can see where they come from. So if I'm not sure where a value is being set, I can jump into the POM file and see it. I can edit the POM file, and those changes will be picked up. I can also make changes to here, so I could add additional dependencies, and those will automatically be added to the Maven file. So the great thing about Maven support is it just works. You don't generally need to think about it. It just does what you need. Okay, so let's talk about collaboration. It's obviously important that we can compare the code. So I've got two projects here. This one obviously is not under version control, so there's no version control. This one is, so if I go into a class, the green tells me that's a test class I added the other day, so it's green. This obviously is live, so I can actually see the history on that. I can go back to the source code. On any line, I can identify when the code was written and by who. If I go back to here, let's switch off. Okay. So if I go here, I can see all the commits. So I can go back to every commit to see which line was generated by who. I've got full support, so I'm using Git here. I've also got built-in support for, I can do everything you'd expect, so I can shelve it. I've also got by default built-in support for Mercurial Subversion, and you can download plugins to add other ones. Again, you can switch these off if you don't want to use them. So you have full support for Git, complete range of everything you can do. You can shelve the code, you can have branches, merge branches, everything from within the IDE. Okay, so code quality is another important thing. So I've already been showing you how NetBeans will pick up errors in code. There are two functions NetBeans can do, and this is for multiple languages. There are Java versions and there are versions for the other languages supported. They generally come with a plugin. So what you can also do is you can actually run inspections. So you can have single inspections, or you can create a set of templates to run inspections. They will check your code and spot errors. The really nice one that you can do is you have an inspect and transform, which will actually also refactor the code. So that will not only find errors, but offer to fix them, and it will give you a list here. And it also includes options to upgrade to another version. So in this case, I could upcode my code base to the JDK 13. So if I run that on the current file, because that's quicker, you'll see it's told me what I can do. It will show me the changes, and I can configure what inspections I want and what I don't want to do. So that makes it really easy to run code quality inspections. NetBeans also has a plugin to support SonarQube, which we use, and it has plugins to support PMD and find bugs as well. So you have full code quality there, and it's all within the IDE as well. So we talked about code quality. So plugins. So I mentioned earlier that NetBeans is a highly modular environment. So if I go here, and I go to plugins, there it is. So everything in NetBeans is a plugin, so everything can be switched on or off. If I wanted to remove, for example, Subversion, because I'm not using Subversion support, I can type that in, and I can see that it is currently installed. So you can see, okay, and I can switch it off. So I can actually download additional plugins. I can also switch things off, switch things on within NetBeans. So it's all very configurable, and I can get it down to just the basic what I was using, and I could take those other version controls off the system. I can also write my own plugins. There's an option to create a NetBeans plugin project, which allows you to extend NetBeans. You can also write applications inside NetBeans. So I said earlier, it's not just a IDE. It's not just an IDE, but it's a highly configurable IDE. Okay, sorry. Next thing I'd like to talk to you just briefly about is there are 4 releases a year, and there is what's called the NetCat program. So every time that happens, we will check their code version will come out, and there will be some testing, and community volunteers are encouraged to do it. So if you're interested in learning how to do testing, find out more about testing, this is a really good opportunity to get in to see how a large organization tests a very, very large block of code. It's also really good because it's how you actually learn how to use the product. It wasn't until I started testing NetBeans that I discovered it has all these useful features to do formatting and stuff, because we're developers, we don't read source code, we don't read documentation normally. So some other features I wanted to just mention very quickly, and as I said, it is a whistle-stop tour. My aim here is to get you excited about NetBeans to go away and try it. Is you have the Matisse, the GUI swing builder, which I showed you earlier. We also have the Java shell, which I showed you, so you can run Java. There are options there to essentially cut and paste that code into classes. So you can do a lot with that. There's a two-way Chrome connector. So I've mentioned that you can use this for writing web applications. You can write the backend in PHP, or you can write Java or C++. You can write the HTML5. If you run the Chrome connector, when you run the project in NetBeans, it will open in Chrome, and it's a two-way connection. So you can actually set debug points in NetBeans, and it will stop in the code. And you can change values. You can update values in Chrome, and they will be picked up by NetBeans. And you can update values in NetBeans, and they'll be picked up in Chrome. There's a profiler. One of those other buttons on the screen allows you to profile code. So it allows you to find out where your memory leaks are or how to speed things up. Terminal window I mentioned, plugin API, so you can actually write plugins. NetBeans was designed from the start to be modular. You can change anything. Branding editor, and it has Docker support as well. So if you want to run Docker, you can run it with inside NetBeans. So the last thing I wanted to mention is obviously NetBeans is an open source project. Download the source code. So this was a little fun experiment I was trying. I wanted to see if you could change the history function, and I wanted to see if you could multicolor different files to put it in. So I downloaded the source code. I downloaded the source code from NetBeans, and I was actually running NetBeans inside NetBeans. I wouldn't recommend it for day-to-day development. There's a version that's put out for there. but it's quite interesting to be able to actually debug the IDE inside the IDE. And there's lots of instructions there on how to use it. So if you'd like to get involved in a big open source project, NetBeans is on GitHub. It's part of the NetBeans community. So I wish you happy developing with NetBeans. I hope I've given you some ideas on things to try in NetBeans. If you'd like to talk to me more about NetBeans, I'm on the IDR Solutions stand for the rest of the day. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to see you involved in GitHub and on the community if you like. And I wish you happy developing. If I don't persuade you to switch to NetBeans, I hope I've persuaded you that IDEs in general are highly configurable, and I hope you explore the IDE of your choice. Well, many thanks for coming to my talk, and I hope to see you on the stand later. Thank you very much.